So last week we were talking about our mind and how one of the big problems with mind talk is that it has a lot of authority in our lives. It has predominance in our awareness. It is very strong and very powerful and very authoritative and authoritarian. And in exploring where this comes from, I think the sense that comes up is that so much of our formation and education has been cerebral. Virtually all of our education is to shape our mind. Most of us have had 12 plus years at school, and all of the focus of that was to shape our mind to think and to remember and to understand and to manage information and to manipulate figures and concepts. And so it was very much a package put into our mind. It was a shaping of our mind, and shaping of our mind in a particular way, because shaping of the mind is not the problem, it's the way it's done that's the problem. And the way I think that most of us were educated was the assumption that our mind, we are like an empty vessel that has to be filled. And so everything has to be put into us. So the more information they can get into us, the more we can remember the information to regurgitate it in an exam or a test. And for life, it's not a bad thing, but the more we can remember that information, the better. So our mind is more of a file manager, a memory manager. It's not it wasn't, in small ways we were encouraged to explore and discover and find out. But we weren't really given license. We weren't given the freedom to engage. We weren't given a way to trust ourselves enough to say, I can find out. It was always a mistrust of ourselves. I don't know, you know, and you need to tell me what I need to know. So there's always that information transfer. And once you had the information and once you proved that you had it by passing, by doing well, by having the results, then you were then acknowledged as being educated, as being formed, as having got there. So the mind became very much the citadel, the sort of focus, the center of what education was about. Only later did things like different types of intelligence come out, spatial intelligence or musical intelligence, other things, but they never had the same level of authority. Understanding is the king. Mental prowess, to be clever, to be top of the class, to be erudite, and the effect of that is that the rest. I mean, how your body knows, how your intuition knows, how your relational self knows, how your certainly not your spiritual self knows. The other forms of knowing are very much secondary and very inferior to cerebral knowing. So mind is king, mind is on top of the pile, as it were, but then mind starts to have its own orbit of reflection, and so mind talk, which is a spin-off from the mind trying to control, trying to manage, trying to understand beyond the sort of norm, that had a lot of influence. So it had a lot of authority, a lot of power, a lot of ability to control. And we come to the place where we wanting to know who we are, we wanting to know how to find that place of equilibrium in ourselves where we can be truly who we are in a full rounded way. But we always come up against this difficult place of the mind, because the mind is a rigid, immovable, in a way superior element, and it's very difficult to then skirt around it. We all know what it means what we should do, what we ought to do, what we must do. There's a lot of pressure to understand, and it's very easy to dismiss anything we don't understand. In an argument, if somebody can prove one point wrong about your argument, they can discount the whole argument. So mind really has the top rung of our awareness and of our authority. And the problem, and we've talked about it as well, the problem is also that the mind we don't realize we have a mind. We think we are a mind. So we think that's me. I'm clever, or I'm stupid, or I'm capable, or I'm not capable. But we think of ourselves as an immovable reality. We don't think of ourselves as having a mind like we have a body. Do we eat healthily? Do we think healthily? We don't think that our thoughts are either healthy or unhealthy. We're hardly aware of which thoughts are healthy and which are toxic. We're certainly aware of which foods are toxic or which are unhealthy for us. So the mind also has the position of almost like being unquestionable. We can't question it and say, hang on, why did I think this? We might when we make a mistake and realize we thought the wrong thing. But generally we accept our mind as being our point of reference, as being our reality. And that gives it an added level of authority, an added level of immovability. So in a sense, we find ourselves in a place where our mind and what it tells itself, what we tell ourselves, is almost like a fixed bastion in the center of our being. And with all that comes with it, because as I said, the education is what was put into us, not what we were discovering and becoming. And again, children who grow up out of school, my father had almost no schooling because in that era, peasant children didn't go to school, and it was unusual that he even went to school and learned to read and write. But that was about all. But he was an enormously wise man, and it was all by experience. And so he had experiential wisdom or knowledge rather than learnt knowledge, which has quite a different feel about it. Equally, being able to work with our hands is an experiential awareness or skill more than a mental skill. But with the predominance of the mental mindset, we find that even physical skills are becoming less and less prevalent. We were taught to do woodwork and metalwork, but now it's not being taught much. I mean, I don't know if women generally know how to knit and crochet nowadays. Again, it was a norm. So we're moving away from the physicality of knowing to the theory of knowing. And what we think we know then takes predominance. And so we can easily say we know. But when you explore what that means, it's very superficial, very theoretical, and almost devoid of experience. So that it becomes almost like a stock in trade. What we know. And obviously, and I needn't say it, but I will say it, with the internet, with so much information being flooded into our awareness, it's taken us to another level where we know everything, and it's almost like we know nothing. And that knowing takes so much of our effort that, we don't play, we don't work, we don't do much with our hands. So, we become so engrossed in mental knowing that we're almost losing touch with reality. And it's no wonder then that when we try to get a sense of who we are, we almost define ourselves by what we know. Or alternatively, we define ourselves by what we have, but we don't define ourselves by who we are. We hardly know who we are without the knowing part of us. So that it's becoming everything's focused on a theoretical, mentally orientated, rational orientated existence, which is leaving many of us, most of us, hungry for more. We know that this is not the whole story. And yet it's hard to pinpoint because our whole society is moving in this direction. It's like everybody is in the same boat. So how do you actually find a place of reference, a place of difference? And I think it's helpful to begin to understand that our discussion on mind talk and the false self and the true self, there's a tremendous tug of war going on, because the false self is so invested in how the world has shaped us that it the other side of the equation almost doesn't exist.